In retrospect, I probably should have used pen, because if you know me, I have very, very small handwriting, and I wrote in pencil. So I'll just do my best. If you know me, you probably only know me as a graduate student, but I've actually been here for almost twice that time. But the last 6 years I've spent have been as a graduate student. So before I explain what I'd like to share to you, I'd like to explain why I'm sharing. So in 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3 and 4, Paul says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort which we ourselves have received from God." So that's my first reason. I believe that we're called to share as a community to build each other up. And in Ephesians 4, verses 15 and 16, it also says, "Speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love." So I just graduated, so I'm still a little bit emotional and a little bit sleep deprived, but that's the reason I want to share with you, and I took it as a personal challenge that I've been through this experience, which, frankly speaking, was the hardest and most awful of my entire life, probably, except my parents divorcing, and this lasted longer. So, I took that as a personal challenge to share with you today, and I also want to challenge you to share your own experiences in the way that God's comforted you, because you never know how it might provide encouragement to someone else. But what I'd like to briefly speak on today is something that has become painfully clear to me over the last 6 years, and that is that God's ways are not our ways, and that we have set expectations. And sometimes when our experiences don't conform to our expectations, it's really difficult. And the 2 points that I'd really like to emphasize are, when experience doesn't conform to our expectations, we really need to follow the advice of Proverbs 3, verse 5, which calls on us to trust in God rather than relying on our own understanding. And we're also called in 1 Peter 5:7 to cast our anxiety on him because he cares for us. And Matthew 6:27, which is something I've come back a lot, basically emphasizes that by worrying, you cannot add even 1 minute to your life. So it's an entirely counterproductive exercise. And finally, in James 1, verses 2 to 4, we're actually called to see our trials as joy. And that's something I'll get to in a moment. But throughout these trials, I found we need to have integrity. And we need to remember that we are called in Romans 12:18 to live peaceably with all people as far as it depends upon us. But that ultimately, everything we're doing is for God and not for men. So in terms of expectations, heading into grad school, I had quite a lot of them. And most of them were unfulfilled. But just to give you an idea, I think this kind of encapsulates my entire grad school experience. This blue card on the top, which is my Chinese name, is actually a name card from a new student's orientation tea that I attended before school began in, I think it was 2010. You can't see it, but underneath it, it says, "The first day of the rest of my life." So no pressure. But what I wrote was, "Not the informal get-to-know-you I had expected. Arriving late, I took an empty seat along an incredibly long table which extended the length of the room. Due to tardiness, I was forced to sit quite close to the head of the table, where the speaker was standing. Not long after I'd quietly taken my seat, the speaker suggested that we get the ball rolling by introducing ourselves. Guess who had to go first?" So that kind of just is my entire grad school experience, being unprepared, not having an understanding of what was coming, because new student tea, I assumed it was a casual get-to-know-you. It was not. It was very important, and critical information was given to us at that meeting. And I rolled in late because I thought, it's just come in, meet some people, it'll be cool. And I almost didn't go, so thank God I did. And we were asked to also tell basically what we wanted to study, or what our what our goal was. And when it got to me, which was first, obviously, I said democratization of China, that I'd like to help with the democratization of China. So obviously, you know, I have very realistic expectations and goals. So one of the things, though, that I was most looking forward to about grad school was working with an advisor. And I had actually really wanted to do that in my undergraduate career. But I had this professor, he was my favorite professor, and when I approached him and asked if he'd be my advisor for a thesis project, which was optional at my university, he said he'd love to, but unfortunately he was going on sabbatical. So he recommended another professor. So I began the course, I began working with her, I met with her a couple of times, and then she won an award and she went on sabbatical. So I ended up writing all by myself and having no input, and one professor agreed to grade my work for me at the end of the term. So I was really excited about getting to actually have someone mentor me and direct me and give me some ideas and bounce ideas around with me. And that did not happen at all. So I actually had a person that had been recommended to me based on my desire to pursue democratization, based on what I believe is now a completely fallacious theory called democratic peace theory. You can look it up later. I wanted to work with this advisor, and I was really excited to meet with her. I got in touch with her in advance. Unfortunately, it seemed at the time, her daughter was actually seriously ill and was in a coma in intensive care. So she actually had to leave that semester and take the entire academic year off. And for me, that was like very, very jolting. I was thinking this was a sure thing. A friend had recommended her. I was looking forward to finally having an advisor, and it just didn't work out. So the advisor that I ended up with is possibly the worst advisor in the entire department. Just to give you a basic idea, the last time that we had any communication, he hung up on me for the second time. So this sounds really awful, and the experience was beyond awful, but it ended up being somewhat of a blessing, not somewhat. It ended up being a blessing because this particular professor that was unavailable had a very strong research focus in what I thought I was interested in. But during the course of grad school, I realized that that's not what I'm interested in at all, and I don't believe in that at all. And my worldview completely shifted. And even though the advisor I ended up with was just, the words cannot describe how awful he was. Even though he was a terrible advisor, the fact that he had utter disregard and I felt sometimes disdain for my work and refused to read anything I ever wrote actually gave me a lot of freedom to find what I was interested in and pursue it. And I've really discovered that I very much am interested in this topic, and it's something I would like to pursue. And I even, I comment on it on Twitter. If you can follow me, but that's all you're going to get, so I don't use it for social purposes. But there are scholars in the United States at the U.S. Naval War College and Center for Naval Analyses, CSIS, that follow me on Twitter and that I've been able to interact with. And had I had another professor, I'm convinced that wouldn't have been the case. So anyway, that was something that I found really difficult to deal with, was having these expectations and being really excited about this experience and having it not be at all what I thought. And my initial reaction, I would say it's hard to avoid bitterness at disappointment, and it's really hard to find joy, when the situation doesn't meet your expectations. And in particular, I felt like the first day, everyone had been given a manual, and I hadn't received it, and I felt like that literally from the first day to the last day, that I had missed the instructions somehow. I still feel that way, but it was really difficult because it made me feel like I was competing with my classmates who were almost entirely Taiwanese, and it was hard not to be bitter, and focusing on that made me feel stuck both in my life and in my studies. And when you put your focus on hardship and comparison, it makes it impossible to find joy. But James says, like I mentioned earlier, consider it joy. And consider is a really strong word. It doesn't say it is. It says consider, which is an explicit command to consciously reframe your thinking. So if you want to find something to be upset about, it is incredibly easy. You can always find fault. There is always something. It is so easy to be upset with things. But I think that that's why Paul says in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, that whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. So I'd say that we have a choice to make, that we decide our focus, and through prayer and support from family and from our church family, we're able to maintain it. And a briefer example of that, I had a PhD student next to me who, if you know me, I've talked about encounters with him, and he and I were polar opposites. Like, I can't even describe the level to which I despise fluorescent lighting, and he loves fluorescent lighting and he hates natural light. So I like the window screen behind us up, he likes it down. He likes the light on, I like it off. And I can cope with that, but he started putting bookcases. He had like 6 bookcases, I think, in the end, that covered the windows and also made it really hard to even open the window. And I tried to have a discussion with him. I offered him the space behind my desk, and he just flew into a rage. And so every time I would come, it would just irritate me thinking about him. And I finally decided that that grace is like letting go, and that grace is undeserved. So it's not up to him, but it's up to me to behave the way that I can. And I worked to really reframe my thinking. So every time I started to think, I don't like him, he's annoying, he's disrespectful, I just stopped. And I wouldn't let myself finish that thought, because I realized that if I had those thoughts about him and didn't stop them, then that affected my behavior towards him. And it was not beneficial to me, because every time I was there, I was stressed out thinking about him. So I found that to be actually a really freeing experience. And something else that I found to be a really good practice that helped to really change my mindset was making a list of things that I was grateful for, of Thanksgiving. And I've done this a few times, and like going back, I sometimes find one of my lists. And it's just really encouraging, and to see how many things and how many ways God has been faithful. And when you don't think about those things, they don't just come to mind. You have to make a conscious effort to do it, but it really changes the way that you think about things, and it allows you to see God's blessings and really experience his provision instead of getting it from him but not appreciating it, not understanding that it's a gift. And I think that that's a completely different mindset. So finally, what I'd like to leave you with is I would say this is a process for me and for all of us. So like Paul says in Philippians 3 that, he says, I haven't attained an ultimate goal, but forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. So I'd just like to thank you all for your support, for everyone who's prayed for me, people who've anonymously donated money or treated me to dinner or taken me to a movie. I just really want to say thank you for that. And I would just want to encourage us to continue to support one another and share what encouragement that the Lord has used to encourage you. So thank you.